All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Shakayla Alvarenga. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mob Museum. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's program, Hispanic Leaders in Law, celebrating Nevada's Latino legal pioneers. We are excited to recognize and celebrate several legal professionals, paving a path for future generations. Thank you to the Clark County Bar Association and the Nevada Latino Bar Association for all of your help, and a special thank you to NV Energy and their team members, Executive Vice President of Business Development and External Relations, Tony Sanchez is here, and Senior Attorney Zelalem Bogala for their ongoing support to make these worthwhile programs free. Now, for those of you who are watching online, attorneys may receive Nevada Continuing Legal Education credit for this program. Please view the instructions listed in our comments tab. So it is a pleasure to introduce our panelists for today's event. We kindly ask that you please hold your applause until the end. Judge Cristina Silva was nominated by President Biden in 2021. Prior to taking the federal bench, Judge Silva was a judge for the 8th Judicial District Court. She previously served as an assistant state attorney for the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office and as an assistant United States attorney in Nevada from 2011 to 2019. She was the first woman and Latina to serve as the criminal chief for that office. Next to her is Leslie Nino Piro. She serves as a top legal advisor to Nevada Attorney General Aaron Ford and the office on a broad range of legal and policy matters. Prior to joining the Attorney General's office, Nino Piro was a staff attorney for the U.S. District Court and an associate attorney at Holland and Hart. She has lived in Las Vegas for more than 30 years and is a proud graduate of UNLV and the William S. Boyd School of Law. Judge Vincent Ochoa's legal experience spans 40 years. He began his legal career in 1978, handling family, civil, and criminal cases as a law clerk for a district judge. He went into private practice the following year, handling civil and family law cases. In 1982, Judge Ochoa was named Nevada Deputy Attorney General. He is currently a district judge in the 8th Judicial District Court. And last but not least, Judge Adriana Escobar was appointed to the district court by Governor Brian Sandoval in 2012. Prior to joining the bench, Judge Escobar worked as a deputy attorney general in the Bureau of Consumer Protection at the Nevada Attorney General's office, where she prosecuted complex mortgage and investment fraud cases. Judge Escobar is a graduate of Bishop Gorman High School and UNLV. Please give all of our panelists a round of applause. So before we hear from our speakers, I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about the legacy of really one of the most respected legal professionals in our state, the late Judge John F. Mendoza. In 1951, Mendoza became the first Hispanic attorney to be licensed in Nevada. He was the first Hispanic Justice of the Peace and the first Hispanic Clark County District Attorney, just to name a few. He passed away in 2011. He undoubtedly paved a way for many of those sitting on the stage tonight. And with the help of his wife, they co-founded the Latino Bar Association. It really is a pleasure to have her here tonight. Our special guest, please welcome to the podium, Miss Eva Garcia Mendoza.
Good evening, everybody. So this year marks the 42nd anniversary of the court-appointed Special Advocate Program, CASA, which was founded in this county, Clark County, Nevada, as a result of the efforts of my late husband, Judge John Mendoza. John was born and raised in Las Vegas. He's a graduate of Las Vegas High School, captain and running back of the football team, the Wildcats. The Wildcats won the state championship and never surrendered a point nor 2 consecutive first downs. At the end of the year, they went 19-0 with a total score of 212-0. The Wildcats then went on to beat the state champions of California, which was San Bernardino, and that score was 14-0. They got to San Bernardino in a bus that didn't have air conditioning in the heat. And in fact, the old team, because they stayed together their whole lives, and I felt like I was part of their class. But I remember them telling a story that the parents had to donate their gas coupons so that they could get enough gas to get to San Bernardino because gas was being rationed at that time. So even though they had to ride in a bus with no air conditioning, beating San Bernardino was a pretty big highlight as well. So John received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Notre Dame in 1952. After returning to Las Vegas, he served as Clark County District Attorney, first starting as Deputy District Attorney under Roger Foley. Then he served as North Las Vegas City Attorney and Justice of the Peace of Las Vegas Township. He was elected to the District Court bench of the state of Nevada in 1966, a position he held for 24 years. After leaving the bench, he served as chairman of the Nevada Public Service Commission and thereafter chairman of the Nevada Transportation Service Authority. He was named a Distinguished Nevadan by the Board of Regents of the University of Nevada and has an elementary school named in his honor. Judge John Mendoza transcended racial politics. I know that Shakayla said, he was the first Latino this and the first Latino that, but the accomplishments that he had was not because he was a Latino, but because of who he was. And he created an amazing legal career. But it wasn't because he was Hispanic, but because he had the initiative and the desire to leave his community a better place than he found it. And while a district court judge in the 8th Judicial District Court, they had a policy of revolving the judges to serve as a juvenile judge. This was long before family court, Vince. Judge Ochoa, excuse me. Vince was my first law partner. And most judges hated that position, but Judge Mendoza relished it. And so he often volunteered for that position, and he had to drive down to Bonanza and Pecos, and not that big, building that they have now. It was a very much smaller building. So as a result of his work as a juvenile judge, he was also elected president of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. During his career, Judge Mendoza recognized the desperate need for skilled and timely decision-making in the lives of abused, neglected, and abandoned children, not only in Nevada, but across the country. Judge Mendoza recognized the lack of quality in the court process and did not tolerate the unfortunate delays in court hearing dates, which often resulted in children literally growing up without permanent homes. He used his knowledge, passion, and energy to educate and extract a level of excellence when dealing with caseworkers, parents, and court proceedings in regard to appropriate needs evaluation and placement. He demanded a clear vision of roles and procedures. He held caseworkers responsible to the children they represented and answerable to the court for decisions they made. But he was troubled by the fact that everyone appearing before him in a dependency case had an attorney speaking on their behalf. The parents had an attorney, the state of Nevada had an attorney, but no one was there to speak for the child. As a result, Judge Mendoza championed national guidelines for improving court practices in child protective cases. And he, along with Judge John Steckety, another former president of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, who was also a family court judge from Grand Rapids, Michigan, they went to Washington and they testified before Congress to request that national guidelines be set to protect those children. He helped establish methods for monitoring court schedules to prevent unnecessary delays and to control continuances. And through his tireless efforts, family courts began to take into account not only the children's safety, but also the emotional impact of separation from their families. He dedicated his life to the rights of the children of Nevada and beyond. In fact, on his gravestone, I wrote, "An advocate for children." If you ever go to Woodlawn Cemetery downtown, you'll see that. But his dedication resulted in a national program which engages volunteers to be a voice for neglected and abused children. And this program was named by Judge Mendoza as the court-appointed special advocate, CASA for short, and CASA means house, home. So each CASA volunteer has an opportunity to walk in the footsteps of Judge John Mendoza in making a meaningful and constructive difference for that child and for the court. The CASA program in Clark County has grown from 15 to 356 trained volunteers, representing nearly 1,000 abused and neglected children annually. So we are grateful for the work performed by CASA and its many volunteers. And actually, I'd like to give a shout out. A good friend of mine is here. I didn't even know she was going to be here, but she was the president for 9 years of the CASA Foundation, Miss Carol Kirschman. So let's give Carol a hand. Finally, in closing, I just want to say that most of the speech I just gave you is written in the congressional record, which Harry Reid gave on the floor of the U.S. Senate on this very date, September 28th, exactly 12 years ago. And he did that to call attention to one of Nevada's finest advocacy programs and to thank Judge Mendoza for the work that he did in CASA. Thank you.
Thank you. We will start our presentation with Judge Cristina Silva, the second Latina federal judge on the United States District Court for the District of Nevada and the third Hispanic judge to ever serve on that court. Judge Silva, who or what inspired you to pursue a career in law?
You know, a little clue to everyone in the audience, we knew this question was coming. So I really was thinking about what or who in particular inspired me. And I don't have a succinct answer. I feel very fortunate that I had exposure to the law early on through an uncle who was a lawyer. And he actually was involved in one of the first class action lawsuits against the FBI for discrimination against Latinos in the 80s. And so perhaps it was that exposure, or I had wonderful mentors in high school, to include two judges, one of which now sits in the federal court in El Paso, my hometown. They both took me under their wing and inspired me in various ways. So I wish I could tell you who or what. I can just say that I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I was very young when I made that decision, and I did a mock trial my freshman year in high school. And I cross-examined somebody, and of course I thought I nailed it, you know. And I was in. I loved it. I wanted to do that for a career. So it's interesting reflecting on how I got here today. I'm just in awe that all of this has happened, and that I'm on the stage with individuals like my colleagues here. But I feel very fortunate to have had such a diverse experience. In applying for the state court position, my mom said, well, you've been preparing for this your whole life. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, you were the first president of a student court when they created that. I said, or the first, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I did do that. And then as I thought about those words, I actually thought about the fact that I am adopted. And so about week 3 of my life, a judge played a role in making me a member of my family, which of course gets me a little bit emotional. My family, oh, excuse me, they're incredible. My brother, his wife, my parents. So, long story short, I don't know, but true lawyer style. But I'm just so incredibly blessed to have lived the life that I have.
Yes, thank you. Well, according to the American Bar Association, so as of July 1st, 68% of the 68 federal judges who were nominated by President Biden and confirmed by the Senate are Black, Hispanic, or Asian American. And that is by far the most demographically diverse set of judicial candidates in history. However, the data does show that the federal judiciary is still far less diverse than the US population. So across the Supreme Court and federal district and appellate courts, 11% of judges are Black, nearly 8% are Hispanic, and nearly 4% are Asian. And so by contrast, the US population is 14% Black, 19% Hispanic, and 6% Asian. Now, Judge Silva, what do you think needs to happen to further close that gap?
I think education is incredibly important, and by education, of course, being able to obtain an education, but educating the public about some of the struggles that individuals face. I know, and through the work with the Latino Bar Association, that students often struggle to pass the bar exam because they are facing other challenges, right? It's really expensive to take the bar exam. So you have added stress of money. Then you have to study if you really want to be on par with your competitors, if you will, for the bar exam. You can't work. So then you have a multiplier of the stress regarding money. And if you think about individuals that might be living at home, helping raise siblings, or taking care of aging parents, or a combination of both, then the stress multipliers just continue to add. And so those are often conversations that are not had, or even things that individuals realize or think about. And I don't think there's anything malicious about it, but it's a reality that is a challenge for individuals, whether you're Hispanic, Black, or any race really, but it's something to think about. And so as we educate the public, that will be a huge part of changing how things operate. I think there'll be more opportunities and sensitivities to that, but also making sure that there are ways to get individuals into law school. And so I'm really proud of the work that Latino Bar Association has done by creating a pipeline. First, working with La Voz at UNLV Boyd School of Law, which I'm confident my friend here will talk about later. They have a wonderful mentorship program. We start early. We have high schoolers involved in that program. We now have a 5K that we just had this weekend. We had over 600 registrants, where we raised money to give scholarships for individuals to take the LSAT. And as of this year, thanks to the State Bar, we had funds to provide tutors for Latino students who are taking the bar. And so we are really having a building block situation to diversify the population and to change the face of what lawyers look like.
Judge Adriana Escobar, you were nodding in agreement, but what are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree with Judge Silva. For me, from a personal perspective, it starts early as possible, even with self-esteem and that sort of things. I mean, just awareness and education and knowing. I think it's really, in many ways, to how you approach things and how you talk to young people. That's one thing that's very important to me, to be able to talk to young people and explain to them and let them know that you can do this. It's not easy, but you can do it if you want to do it. And I just think that it's critical to have a very positive approach, a realistic approach. And it's not easy for many people, for many of us, but the truth is, I think it starts very young. And so I think a lot of it has to do with educating parents as well, so that they know how to interact with their children. I know my mom and dad told me I could do anything I wanted to do. How blessed was I? That's from day one. I was blessed. So I think it's critical to let them know even if the path is long, it's possible. And I think it should start very young. Before I became a lawyer, I worked in San Diego as a drug and alcohol abuse therapist. And I prepared like 5 different, for nonprofit on television in Spanish called, for the parents so that they would understand about drugs, because in those days, over 30 years ago, there wasn't a lot out there. So it was very important. I had psychologists in Spanish, also making sure that it's just the younger the better. a lot of different aspects, but very positive, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Nino Piro was, as we mentioned, a founding member of La Voz, the Hispanic Law Students Association, and the Huela's mentorship program, which is aimed at supporting and inspiring Latino students in high school, college, and law school. And I know this is so important to you and something you're extremely passionate about, so tell us why.
So I am the proud daughter of an Air Force veteran and a stay-at-home mom who prepared taxes part-time. And as you mentioned, that the Latino population comprises 19% of the US population. In Clark County, it's even more, upwards of 30%, and as well as Nevada and Clark County. But for attorneys, we only make up about 5% of attorneys. Well, in law school, those numbers dwindled. There was only a few of us in law school. I see a couple of my classmates here tonight. So it was really important for us to have that camaraderie in law school. As I got to know some of my classmates, I found out that some of them had parents who were attorneys or other family members who were attorneys. I had only met one attorney in my life prior to going to law school. So having attorneys, having other law students who you could have that sense of community with was just wonderful. And then from that grew the idea for UEAS, where we could be paired with law students, college students, and also high school students, where we would be able to ask questions to lawyers about their journey. So as like I mentioned, I'd only had one attorney who I'd ever met in my life prior to going to law school. So as a college graduate, and not to mention the first college graduate in my family, not to mention going to law school, I didn't have anyone in my family that I could ask about student loans or internships, what direction to go in my career. And we realized that many other law students would feel that same way. So setting up this program was just pivotal to having those connections that would really guide young law students and students throughout as young as high school, and bringing them along, showing them what was possible. Because if Latinos could see themselves in these positions, pivotal roles, and positions of power, then it would foster those feelings of empowerment.
And now you also served on the board of directors for the Nevada Latino Bar Association for 5 years. So kind of tell us a little bit more about your story, why you applied to law school, and what challenges you faced as a young mother too.
Sure. So in contrast to Judge Silva, I was not one of those law students who knew ever since childhood that law school was my path. But I was very fortunate that I had a college professor in my junior year at UNLV. I took a Chicano literature class, and he approached me and told me that I was a really talented writer, and that he could tell from our very spirited discussions in class that I enjoyed arguing. And he asked if I had ever thought about going to law school. And I had never asked myself that question. It had never occurred to me before that that was possible. And so I sat back and mulled that question for a while, and it was just like the heavens parted. And I'm so grateful to Professor Perez for even just incepting that idea, and that he saw something in me that I did not even know was possible. And I'm here today because of that simple question.
And who is the handsome young fellow?
This is he's now 24, so this was a very long time ago. But you mentioned the challenges of being a young mom and going to law school. And I'll tell you, the first challenge was convincing my mom that it was a good idea for me to go to law school. Family is really important in the Latino community. And so for her, her heart was really in the right place. To her, it was such an accomplishment as the first in my family to graduate with a college degree. So she felt as though law school was going to take too much. It was too much of a time commitment. Like, you've done such a great accomplishment. Like, do you really need to do this? It's going to take too much time away from my son. At that point was in second grade. So I really had to stand my ground a little bit and tell her, this is worth it. It's worth the short-term pain of losing a little bit of sleep, so that I will be able to be financially stable, so that I'll never rely on a man to take care of me. I'll be able to take care of myself, take care of my son. But more importantly, that he would be proud of me, and that he would know that he is able to accomplish anything he puts his mind to. Another challenge, of course, was juggling law school with an elementary-age son. I was going to law school during the day while he was in school, and then when class was over, we'd go home. I'd make sure that he was fed and bathed and his homework was done and before I could start my own reading. So it was definitely challenging. I am not ashamed to admit that he spent a lot of time on the Xbox, but he enjoyed it. He is fine. He is just fine. Mommy needed to study.
Yeah. She's doing great.
Thank you. Judge Vincent Ochoa is the son of a migrant worker father who settled down to work at the General Motors plant in Flint, Michigan. This is a photo of a younger Judge Ochoa with his father, brother, and sister in the 1960s. Judge Ochoa, what was it like growing up in Flint, Michigan?
Oh, before I get to that, I wanted to say regarding Judge Mendoza, I went to law school at Notre Dame with his daughter, Vicky Mendoza. And she introduced me to Judge Mendoza on graduation weekend. And a couple of weeks later, he offered me a job, and that's how I came to Las Vegas. And I law clerked for Judge Mendoza. So I'm always grateful for his help and assistance, because my wife and I had never been west of the Mississippi River, and we didn't know much about Las Vegas. I knew it was out there someplace. And so we came out with 2 children and $500 in our pockets, and that was borrowed from our parents. Yeah. But if you can see in that picture, I'm squinting. That's because it was like in the 2nd or 3rd grade that my parents realized and my teachers realized I could not see without glasses. So after that, I received glasses, and it was a brand new world.
I thought it was the sun.
Yeah. No. And my sister, Auralia, she's also a lawyer. She was a lawyer for a Michigan hospital's compliance officer, and they started out in Flint, Michigan, and then they have hospitals now throughout the state of Michigan. And she's retired now. My brother, George, was a purchasing manager for the Flint truck plant. And so we all went to college. 2 of us graduated from law school and became attorneys. And I want to thank my parents, my mom and dad. Even though they didn't speak English, they provided us a house, a place to live. And I know my dad would always say, you can do better, and you better do your homework. Even though he went to work at 3 and came back at 11 at night, he always wanted my homework on the table so he could check it and grade it. Mm-hmm. So and one year, we didn't have any math work, and I kept telling my dad, we don't have any math work. So my dad went down to the school, talked to the principal, and said, there's no math? How can they survive without any math? So they got a new teacher in, and he started He started halfway through the year to teach us math. So I was always grateful because he made it focus. And growing up in Flint, it was the great time in Flint at that time. It was the golden age of Flint. They had 7, 8 automobile plants. They had a truck plant, and everyone had a job. It was also a black and white city. We could, right down the middle, we knew what street. It was called Saginaw Street. It was the main street. One side was white, one side was black. My family lived on the black side, and I had cousins, uncles and cousins who lived nearby. All my friends, all my friends were black. And so we played baseball, we traded comic books, we played cards, we learned how to play chess. And I had a Sears Roebuck bike, and I rode it with everybody else. We used to ride the bikes around the community. First time I left the community, just getting a little bit, because I had to go to a baseball game, someone called me Whitey. And I looked around because I didn't know who he was talking to. And then I realized he was calling me Whitey. I said, wow, okay. So that was we had a wonderful time. Our house was a 2-bedroom, kitchen, a utility room, and 2 of those homes could fit in this room. So it was a small home, but we had a home, and we didn't know the difference. I didn't know about Newport Beach or Seattle or San Francisco. That was a great life. Everyone was working, all the plants were booming, and then I went to college in 1970, and then that's when Flint started to go down. But if you want to know more about Flint, there's a movie called Roger and Me. It's a complete history of when I was growing up in Flint. It was made by Michael Moore, and I'm sure you can see it on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Well, all the homework that your dad was pressuring you about paid off. You ended up earning your economic degree from Michigan State and his law degree from the University of Notre Dame. Can you kind of just briefly explain what led you to your current position in the family court?
Well, I practiced law for 30 years, and in those 30 years, first year I worked for Judge Mendoza as a law clerk, and also we did some work down at juvenile court. And then they were talking about not knowing lawyers. I had never even been in a law office until my first job, and I worked for John Peter Lee. And when I walked into the office, I realized this is the first time I had ever been in a law office and seen lawyers in the law office. We had lawyers who came and taught us at Notre Dame, but I had never been in a law office. I did work at Notre Dame for National Center for Law and the Handicapped. And then I also worked for the migrant farm workers up in Michigan as an intern. But at 30 years, I did juvenile court and family court. And then I also represented the juveniles. And then I also represented the parents in abuse and neglect. And then I did divorces. So every week, if not every day, I was down in family court. And then I was seeing the judges who were practicing in family court at the time. And I said to myself, I can do just as good, if not better. And that's why I decided to run for family court judge.
How have you managed family court? I can imagine how emotional and complex it may be. What kind of challenges have you faced?
Well, I want to say that that I knew I was a Latino judge, because there's not too many, especially male Latino judges. So I knew I had to do good and better than good, because there's sometimes a lot of Hispanic politicians that get in trouble, and I didn't want to get in trouble. I wanted to be a role model for other students who wanted to run for office, run for judge. As far as family court judge, it's a very emotional job. No one leaves with a lot of joy, because family court is not a multiplication area, it's a division area. We divide property, so everyone has a reason to be a little bit unhappy. We don't have many resources. We have the same problems the whole community has. We have mental health issues, we have drug issues, we have economic issues, and then sometimes we just have abusive parents. So we have to deal with all that with very limited resources. We have one center where we can provide supervised visits for parents, when they are not able to take care of their children together. And we only have one of those, and it's down at family court. And, Clark County has spread out so much. We really need another center where we can have supervised visits, because it's very difficult for someone from the southwest part of the county or even from Mawapa to come out to just this one center to see their child, 2 hours a week.
Right. Thank you. Now, this is a photo of Judge Adriana Escobar's grandparents and great-grandparents, I believe, who immigrated from Italy to Columbus.
Okay, so I'm actually an immigrant. I was born in Cali, Colombia, South America. I'm very proud of my background. My first language is Spanish. When I started kindergarten, before that, my parents came here, and they're the only ones in their family that came here. So they actually my dad was kind of wild, and he was in the Naval Academy in Cartagena. He was kicked out. He was drinking, but he was like 19. So it wasn't like, and then, so they didn't want us to come here, but my father decided we're moving. So I moved here when I was 1.5 years old. And when I started kindergarten, it was at Paradise School where the Boyd School of Law started. I was in kindergarten, and when I moved here, it was a very long time ago, and they didn't have anyone that spoke Spanish, and I spoke no English. So it was really a culture shock, even when I was small. But I've been blessed. So the far left photograph is Vicente Pisano and Leonor Monsalve Pisano, my great-grandparents. They moved from Italy to Colombia. And the ones on the right are Alejandro Escobar Chavarriaga and Gabriela Melguizo de Escobar, my grandparents, my paternal grandparents. And they immigrated to South America. And I was thinking about this after when you invited me, and I'm very proud to be here, and thank you, that I'm from a family of immigrants. We just keep moving like nomads around, but there's still, the family's all there, right? But I've just been so blessed. I've also had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in South America, in Colombia, with my family. I studied there 2nd grade and I think 4th grade, and I was there every summer. So I really know my family and my culture and my ethnicity, and it's something that I'm very proud of and fortunate to know. And in my home, unless there was someone that didn't speak Spanish, I had to that didn't speak Spanish, so we would speak English. I had to speak in Spanish. I was not allowed to speak English because my parents wanted me to cultivate my culture. It was critical. And so I've just been blessed. I had a moment in my life. I had the lightning bolt. I didn't even know if that's the question, but I'm going to tell you. I was 12 years old, and I was in Cali, Colombia, at El Teatro Municipal with my cousin Patricia Escobar, who passed away. She was 2 years older than I, and we were at a matinee because we weren't allowed to go out at night because that was, very conservative families. And there was a documentary about Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti. They were Italian immigrants, and they were anarchists. Bottom line is they were tried and executed for the Braintree robberies. I think it was in Massachusetts. And, it just seemed, there was like a universal cry because they had a strong alibi and everything else. I was 12, and I walked out of there, and I said, Patricia, yo voy a ser un juez. That's it. Like, that was the moment. And I didn't even know that you had to be a lawyer first to become a judge, but that was it, because and then they were actually exonerated after death. So that's long after I was 12, but, it was just amazing. So that was the moment, and I don't know. I realized later as I grew up that I had attorneys in Colombia in my family, but I really didn't talk to them about the law very much. And I just found my way there. It's always been what I wanted to do, and I love the law. It's my passion. I think one day I'll retire and I'll still be doing pro bono work. And it's interesting because I've never really, I'm very independent, and this is very interesting because I had a law firm. I didn't know, I was telling you earlier, or telling Eva earlier, that I didn't know that we had Sanawa, the women's club, or the Latin club, or anything. I had so many pro bono cases, and this is how it would be. My mom, mi amor, por favor, fulanita de tal necesita ayuda, and ¿cómo no la vas a ayudar? Claro, mamá, no hay problema. Mi amorcito, I had almost a full, literally, practice. Most of my practice was pro bono for like the first 2 years. I was blessed because my partner was my former husband. We're still very close friends. He's the father of my only child, Alexandra, our only child. And it was like August or September, and he came in and he's like, honey, are you going to bill? And I said, I've got all these cases. He goes, don't worry, let's talk about it next year. Right?
Nice.
But we were in a situation where we weren't wealthy, but we didn't have a lot of debt. So I was able to do that, and I mentor people all the time. I have 3 young women that are Latin. They're from different countries. They speak, their first languages are Spanish. One of them is not. And they're starting law school, and I've been talking to them for years. I've been trying to help them. So to me, it's just been a wonderful life. And my passion to be able to live what I wanted to do since I was 12 is just amazing to me, right? So I've just been blessed, very blessed.
Thank you.
Oh, that's my mom passed away, but that's my family. That's my investiture, and my cousin Jorge, who's he was like the good one in the family. He ate his green beans when we were visiting our grandparents in the summer. He made his bed. He also went to MIT and got his master's, and he went to Stanford Business School after that. But I was like the naughty one who we were dressed to go out, and I'd have like end up with a Band-Aid. But anyway, that was a very special day.
And my daughter is your daughter here?
My daughter Alexandra on the far left, my mom to my right, and my cousin Jorge Calderon and Maria Fernanda. I was just with them in Colombia about 2 weeks ago. Hadn't seen them in a long time, years actually.
Thank you. Now, Judge Escobar has also presided over the Veterans Treatment Court for the 8th Judicial Court for 3 years. Can you tell us a little bit more about the specialty program for people who may not know and how it has helped veterans in the community?
I'm so glad that I get to say this because the Veterans Court, first of all, I presided over 5 specialty courts for a year and a half. So it was felony DUI, Veterans Court, Drug Court, Mental Health Court, and the Open Program. So 5 of them for a year and a half, and then after that, I split my docket, became half civil, and then I kept the Veterans Court and the felony DUI. And I am a firm believer in rehabilitation, firm believer. And it was a beautiful experience as a judge to be able to do this. I'm a former substance abuse counselor, and I used to counsel. That was just, I just fell upon that in life, and I studied, took the exam for the state, and passed it, and it went from there. But it's such an important program because instead of going to prison, you have people that, not everyone is capable of rehabilitating, but to be able to be there and have some energy to be able to help them help themselves, right? It's just so wonderful that they can change their lives and be members of society and, their families. It's a win-win. There's lower crime. There's, the taxes are lower. I mean, everything. It's just such a wonderful thing, and it's really important. And when I did have felony DUI, and the veterans, of course, a lot of them are codependent or co-occurring disorders. We have a lot of people that have substance abuse issues, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, and they also have mental health issues as well, right? They're co-occurring. But the veterans, it was such an honor and a privilege to work with all of them, and especially the veterans who served our country, and it was just very, very meaningful. But I also had felony DUI, and I had only Spanish speakers. So it was an evening program, and all of the people and that was one of them. And we had I don't want to misspeak, but it was one of the largest programs in the United States at the time, right? So one of the top 5. So they actually spoke Spanish, and I'd have the translator translate in English so that we could sort of move it along and bond. It was a wonderful experience to be able to do that. But most of them were English speaking, but it was just great. It's just really an important program in my view.
Thank you.
Yes.
That it is. Now, before we open the discussion up to our audience, I would just like to hear from each of you, and we can kind of close it out on the growing demand for more Hispanic voices here in Nevada. So we can start, or you guys can have a conversation what you're most comfortable with, but what goals do you think the local Latina community can set for itself within the next 10 years, and what can we do to get there?
Well, I'll say I want to echo the thanks that was given by Judge Escobar earlier for everyone who's in attendance here today, but also my thanks to the Mob Museum and our community partners, because hosting events like this is one step in the right direction for us to grow and develop and recognize the roles that Hispanics play in our community. Obviously, we are a large segment of the population, as you mentioned, about 30%, though I do wonder if that's a little higher post-COVID, I don't know. But we are integral to this state, to this economy, and so having these conversations and these opportunities is what needs to continue to happen, so that way kids can see people who look like them and can learn that, yes, you can be anything that you want to be. And so my thanks to everyone in attendance and for supporting and for organizing this event. I think it's a step in the right direction.
So a goal that I would love to see in our community is to have the levels of representation be commensurate with the population. So if we are near or above 30% in the population, then I'd like to see that represented in not only in the legal community, but in business, finance, education, STEM, medicine, in every industry across the board. I think we should have that representation from the Latino community. And I think some of the steps that we can take to get there, improving the education system as we're constantly taking those steps, but increasing scholarships, mentorship programs like WEAS, which is open right now and needs
right.
attorneys to apply to be mentors. Shameless plug for WEAS. And partnering with organizations in the community like the Latin Chamber of Commerce to find out what other concrete steps we can take to increase representation, because if you see it, you can be it. And I'm a firm believer that that's what it's going to take.
Number one, I would like to thank the Mob Museum for this event.
Yes.
I appreciate being here and that you've done a wonderful job in putting this event together. Another thing I want to say, Eva Garcia and us three, we're all from Texas. 3 of us are from Southern Texas. So when we started talking before, we all realized we were from Texas. I worked with juveniles in family court, and I realized that 90% of the juveniles we see in criminal action, they come from a one-parent family. We see sometimes a child that comes from a 2-parent family, but we only see them one time. Once they get in trouble, they don't come back. So I think where it will start is with the parents. Some parents, it's surprising, I found out practicing law, that they don't care about education. They just want you to, maybe go a couple years of high school and get a job. And other parents really push their children to learn and to do better and to study harder. And so I think it's very important, the role that parents play, even before we get to our point where we try to pull them up. They need to be pushed up by the parents and supported by the parents as much as possible, even if you just give them a desk and a light where they can study.
I'm repeating myself, but I do think it's critical to reach the parents and the family members and community members as well, because I think that's where it starts. The earlier, the better. And I think the WEAS program is fantastic. I've been there before, but I have to call tomorrow and try to do it in a more organized way. I'm happy. That's an amazing program that you started, by the way. I celebrate you. Yeah. So I think the sooner the better and earlier.
Thank you. Now, we will open this discussion up to the audience. We have like 5 minutes. We did get a question online from one of our viewers who said, what is the one thing that you would tell younger attorneys right now? And maybe just one of you can answer that question.
I'll answer it. Work hard. Work hard wherever you're working at that moment. Be completely invested in it. Even if your goals are different, it doesn't matter. Be fully invested in the moment. And also be open. If someone knocks on your door and says, do you want to be on the Public Utilities Commission? I did. I said, okay, I'll try it, even though the only thing I know about utilities right now is that you go like this and the lights go on, and you go like this. In the midst of the energy crisis, be open to any opportunity, and know that you can do it. If you work hard, you can do it. Just celebrate yourselves, work hard, and follow through. I think that's pretty much what's happened in my life.
I wanted to add that if you have a law firm, you have to have the staff and yourself to treat everyone that comes through your door as if there were $1 million case. Because sometimes you say, oh, I don't want to talk to that person, doesn't have a good case. Because one of the biggest cases I ever had just came in the door, and he said he had a workman's comp case, and it turned out to be a works product case, and it turned out to be a very big case. So I learned, even if you just do a simple divorce, they're going to send you more clients. So try to treat everyone special and do your best work for everyone.
Thank you. Does anyone here in the audience have a question? And you can just raise your hand right over here. We're just going to bring this mic over to you.
So my question's for Leslie. Leslie, I've always been very, very impacted by your career because you spent so long working in the habeas context, doing criminal law, and to me it's always seemed like such a big jump to go from civil to criminal and to go from criminal to civil. And you did exactly that, right? So you were working in the habeas context for so long, and now you're doing a lot of civil work with the State Attorney General's office at the highest levels. And I guess I'm just wondering what your advice would be for people who kind of want a similar career trajectory. That kind of jump really, really scares me.
So I'm going to echo Judge Escobar's advice of being open. When I initially was offered the opportunity to work in the habeas context, I was terrified, and I did not want to take the job. But after a little bit of reflection, I started to look at it as an opportunity and a challenge. It was a new area of law that I thought, if I'm going to get paid to learn an entirely new area of law, that's really cool. So, looking at it as a challenge and something that I could really sink my teeth into, I think being invested, like Judge Escobar said, in putting your all into every position that you have, even if it's, I'll tell you, when I was in private practice, not every case that I was assigned to was one that I loved, but that's okay, because you're gonna learn something from every single case that you work on. I'd also recommend getting involved in pro bono work, because even though I didn't feel that an adoption, that was my, that's something that I would do in private practice, working on adoptions, or taking a CAP case, a Children's Attorney Project case. It was really difficult to represent children in the foster care program. Emotionally, it was difficult. All of those things have just continually built my legal skills, and really, I feel, prepared me for the job that I have now. So just being open to all of those opportunities really prepared me for what I have now, for being general counsel. I've got a experience in so many different contexts that, and I've learned how to pick up new areas of law pretty quickly.
Thank you. Does anyone else here have a question? I know someone has a question. We'll just do one more. Anyone? Okay. All right. Well, we're right on time then. Thank you all for being here. We certainly hope that you enjoyed tonight's discussion. Now, as a reminder for those who have signed up, the Clark County Bar Association will be holding a reception downstairs in the delivery. Again, a special thank you to the Clark County Bar Association, the Nevada Latino Bar Association, and the Energy, and all of our panelists here tonight. Have a great night. Thank you.
for having me.